If your emotional state is being dictated by the people around you, you're quietly giving away control over your trajectory, your decisions, your relationships, even the opportunities you notice. Most people think their mood is just something that happens to them. A bad interaction ruins the day. Stress follows them home. One negative environment can drain their energy for hours. But the real cost isn't just feeling bad. Over time, reactive emotional patterns narrow how you think, how you respond, and what possibilities you even recognize. 5 years can pass with the same emotional loops quietly shaping the same outcomes. Psychology calls this emotional contagion. Your nervous system constantly synchronizes with the emotional signals around you. Without realizing it, your internal state becomes a reflection of your environment. And when that happens, your emotional baseline, the frequency you operate from, stops being a choice and becomes a habit. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending life is easy. It's about understanding a simple internal mechanism most people never learn to control, because once you understand it, you can interrupt the loop. In this video, you'll see 3 patterns that quietly lower your emotional baseline, and one simple internal adjustment that can raise it within minutes. Most people start their day believing they are in control of how they feel. They wake up, check a few messages, respond to emails, organize small tasks. The routine feels normal. Coffee, notifications, conversations. Nothing unusual. At first, the mood is stable. But then something small happens. A message arrives with a slightly negative tone. Someone complains about a problem. A co-worker walks into the room, already frustrated about something that happened earlier. Nothing dramatic, just a shift in the atmosphere. And slowly, almost without noticing, the emotional tone of the day begins to change. You were feeling fine earlier, focused, clear. But now your attention moves toward the tension in the room. Your body tightens a little. Your thoughts start replaying what was said. You respond to the next task with slightly less patience. Then another conversation happens. Someone shares bad news. Another person begins venting about something that went wrong. Again, nothing catastrophic. But the emotional weight accumulates. Your energy drops a little more. The strange part is that it feels completely normal, almost automatic. Most people assume this is just part of life, that moods rise and fall depending on circumstances, that emotions simply react to whatever environment they happen to be in, so they continue moving through the day this way. A conversation improves the mood for a while. Then another interaction pulls it down again, up, down, up, down. Hours pass like this, and by the end of the day, many people can't clearly explain why they feel drained. They just know something shifted. What most people never stop to examine is a simple possibility. The emotional state they believe belongs to them might actually be following the emotional tone of the room around them. At first, the pattern looks harmless. Someone walks into the room excited about a new idea, and your energy lifts with theirs. The conversation becomes animated. Possibilities start appearing. Later that same day, another person arrives carrying stress from a meeting that went wrong. Their voice is tense, their attention is scattered. Within minutes, the atmosphere changes again. Your thinking becomes slightly heavier. Nothing dramatic happens. You still complete your tasks. You respond to messages. You move through the same routine as always. But the tone of your internal state keeps shifting depending on who enters the space. Most people never question this. They assume emotions simply react to circumstances. A good interaction creates a good mood. A difficult conversation creates tension. It feels logical. So the day continues. Morning energy depends on the first conversations. Afternoon focus depends on the last meeting. Even the way the evening feels can depend on one unexpected interaction. Over time, a small habit begins forming. Instead of generating their own emotional stability, people begin unconsciously synchronizing with the emotional signals around them. When the environment is calm, they feel calm. When the environment becomes tense, their internal state quietly adjusts in the same direction. The adjustment happens automatically. No decision is made, but the consequence slowly becomes visible. Your attention begins reacting more than directing. And when attention becomes reactive, something subtle starts to change. The emotional baseline that guides your decisions is no longer coming entirely from you. At first, the changes are almost invisible. Your routine still looks productive. You complete tasks, answer messages, attend meetings, solve small problems throughout the day. From the outside, nothing seems different. But internally, something begins to shift. When emotional states constantly adjust to the environment, your attention starts moving in shorter cycles. Focus becomes slightly fragmented. You might notice it during simple moments. You begin reading a message, but your mind replays a tense conversation from earlier. A comment someone made keeps echoing longer than it should. Later, when making a decision, your response feels slightly rushed. Not wrong, just less clear. Again, nothing dramatic. But clarity begins depending on the emotional atmosphere around you. On calm days, thinking feels sharp. Decisions come easily. On heavier days, everything feels slightly slower. You hesitate more. You second-guess small choices. Most people interpret this as normal fluctuation in motivation. They tell themselves they just need more sleep, more coffee, or a better schedule. But the pattern keeps repeating, and gradually another consequence appears. When your emotional state is constantly adjusting to the environment, your reactions begin to change before you even notice them. You respond more quickly to tension. You withdraw slightly faster during conflict. You hesitate longer before expressing ideas. None of these moments feel significant on their own, but together they begin shaping how you show up in conversations, decisions, and opportunities. And the more this pattern repeats, the more your internal state starts, depending on whatever emotional signal happens to enter the room next. After a while, the pattern becomes predictable. You enter a calm environment and your mind settles. Conversations feel easy. Ideas move freely. Then a tense interaction appears, a complaint, criticism, or frustration someone brings into the room. Almost immediately, your internal state shifts with it. Again, nothing extreme happens. You continue the conversation. You continue working. But the emotional tone underneath your actions has already adjusted. And because this adjustment happens repeatedly, something subtle begins forming in the background. A loop. Your nervous system starts using the emotional signals around you as reference points. Each new interaction slightly recalibrates how you feel. Calm environments produce calm responses. Tense environments produce guarded responses. Over time, this repeated synchronization begins to establish something deeper, an emotional baseline. Not the mood of a single moment, but the general level your mind tends to return to throughout the day. Most people assume this baseline belongs entirely to them, but in reality, part of it has been quietly shaped by hundreds of small interactions with the environments they move through. Workplaces, social circles, family dynamics, daily conversations. Each one contributes small signals that your system absorbs and mirrors. And because the adjustment happens automatically, people rarely question it. They simply assume that how they feel is who they are. But once this loop settles into place, another consequence begins appearing. The environments around you stop just influencing your mood for a moment. They begin shaping the emotional frequency you operate from most of the time. At first, the loop still feels manageable. You adapt to the emotional tone around you, then reset later. A stressful conversation fades after a few hours. A calm environment restores your focus again. Life continues moving. But when the same emotional synchronization repeats day after day, something quieter begins to accumulate. Your nervous system starts expecting certain emotional climates. If you spend enough time around tension, criticism, or constant urgency, your body slowly learns to anticipate those signals even before they appear. You walk into a room already slightly guarded. You read a message already expecting a problem. Nothing extreme has happened, yet your internal state prepares for it anyway. This preparation begins shaping small decisions. You choose safer responses in conversations. You hold ideas back a little longer. You observe more before speaking. From the outside, it looks like responsibility, maturity, emotional control. But inside, something else is forming. Your baseline has moved lower than it used to be. Clarity requires more effort. Calm takes longer to return. Energy fluctuates more depending on the environment you're in. Most people never connect these changes to a larger pattern. They simply assume life has become more complicated. Responsibilities increased, pressure grew, time became shorter, so they adapt. Years pass this way. The same emotional loop continues running quietly in the background, and eventually the way you feel in most situations begins to resemble the emotional climate you've been absorbing for the longest time. After enough time, the pattern begins to reveal its structure. What once looked like random emotional shifts now follows a clear sequence. First comes effort. You show up each day, handle responsibilities, respond to problems, move through conversations and decisions the best way you can. That effort slowly becomes routine. You learn how to manage the pace of the environment around you. You adapt to the tone of the people you interact with. You adjust your reactions to keep things moving smoothly. At first, this stability feels like progress, but routine has a quiet side effect. When the same emotional responses repeat long enough, they stop being conscious choices. They become automatic settings. Your system begins operating from a familiar baseline, not necessarily the one you originally chose, the one it adapted to. If the environments you move through carry tension, urgency, or negativity, that emotional signal becomes part of the routine your mind expects. And once routine sets the baseline, something subtle begins happening to your perception. You start noticing experiences that match the state you're already operating from. Conversations feel heavier, problems appear more frequently, opportunities become harder to recognize. Not because they disappeared, but because your internal state has quietly tuned itself to a different emotional frequency. At this point, most people believe the environment is controlling everything, but the structure reveals something else. The environment influences your emotional state. Your emotional state influences what you notice, how you react, and how others respond to you. And slowly, that interaction begins shaping the direction your life moves. Once the structure becomes visible, something important changes. The pattern that once felt automatic begins to look interruptible. Your environment may still carry emotional signals, stress, urgency, frustration. Those things will always exist around people. But your internal state no longer has to synchronize with every signal that appears. Most people assume emotions simply happen to them. But your emotional baseline is not fixed. It's constantly adjusting based on where your attention goes and what your body is doing in that moment, which means it can also be adjusted deliberately. The first shift begins with awareness. Instead of immediately reacting to the emotional tone around you, you pause long enough to notice what your body is doing, the tension in your shoulders, the speed of your breathing, the pressure building in your chest. This moment of awareness interrupts the automatic loop. The second shift happens through the body. Slow breathing signals safety to your nervous system. A longer exhale than inhale gradually lowers internal tension. Within seconds, the emotional signal in your body begins to soften. Nothing dramatic, just enough space returning to your thinking. And then comes the final adjustment, choosing the emotional tone you want to operate from. Not pretending everything is positive, not forcing emotions away, simply deciding the internal state you want, guiding your next response. Calm, patience, clarity. When this adjustment happens, something subtle changes in how you move through the environment. Instead of absorbing every emotional signal around you, your internal stability begins influencing the room itself. Conversations slow down, reactions become less impulsive, your decisions come from a clearer place, and over time, that stability becomes your new baseline. The same environments may still exist, the same situations may still appear, but the emotional state guiding your responses is no longer being dictated by them. It's being chosen by you.